VIVEK Ramaswamy, presidential candidate. Looking forward to chatting.
Period.
Period.
You're supposed to do this. The period.
Okay, period. VIVEK Ramaswamy.
Period.
Period.
Udwak here, connecting people with policy, where we connect everyday people with policy. From businessman to 2024 presidential candidate, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Vivek Ramaswamy.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Am I saying your name correctly, Vivek?
Yeah, you are saying it really well, actually. VIVEK Ramaswamy.
Perfect. Yeah. And I heard you just had a birthday. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. It was yesterday, actually. I appreciate that.
Oh, what'd you do?
We honestly took a little bit of downtime with the kids. We did not have cake, but we put the candle on a donut. My sons love donuts, and it turns out I enjoy them once in a while too.
Perfect.
My parents came over. It was honestly amidst a campaign that's running a million miles an hour in a lot of directions. It was good to just have a peaceful day at home. Yeah,
for sure. We can go ahead and just dive right in.
Yes.
So right now, for the average American, the main problem that we're seeing right now is within our economy. So we have people who are spending $2,000+ a month for rent, for example, or we have people who are working 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. What are your direct plans to help those working class Americans?
So inflation is one of those major problems. Yes, the rate of inflation has come down, but absolute inflation is cumulative. And prices have gone up for everyday Americans without their wages going up to catch up. That's a big problem. Left, right, black, white, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. One of the things driving this is the fundamental hostility towards the US energy sector. We have a Biden administration that frankly has decided that they're hostile to fossil fuels, drilling, fracking, burning coal. That's driving up cost, and that cost is being passed on to the consumer because energy is the most fundamental input into the economy. I think the other issue right now is that we don't have the rate of economic growth, GDP growth, that we have enjoyed in much of our national past. One reason why is that it's really hard for businesses, both big and small, to find people with the right skills to actually fill the open positions. So I think we should no longer pay people more to stay at home than we do to actually go to work. And so between the crippling federal regulations across the board, especially for the energy sector, the distortion of incentives for people not to work, where people working actually helps lift our economy up, those are examples of easy steps that I can take to help revive the American economy, also fight inflation. And frankly, reform of the Federal Reserve is another big problem where the reason why real wage growth hasn't gone up for the bottom 99% in the entire 21st century is that the Federal Reserve has been fundamentally hostile to wage growth. They treat that as a leading indicator of inflation. First of all, it's a trailing indicator of inflation. That means they tighten monetary policy like whack-a-mole every time wages go up. It's no surprise that we haven't had real wage growth. And that also means, by the way, they tighten monetary policy into a downturn of the business cycle, which gives us financial crises. So I know that was a lot, but I think there's a lot the president can do to help address the economic plight of many Americans.
Okay, so something that you said that you brought up was the remote working, that within your policy that you want to take people away from remote working specifically. What are you trying to gain, I would say, when it comes to?
So to be clear, when I was saying stay at home rather than go to work, I didn't mean remote work. I meant being outside of the workforce altogether, right? I think we've created disincentives to work because many of the federal aid programs are not tied to work requirements. During the COVID spending spree, we had literally just free paychecks going home to people that actually stopped them from giving them an incentive to go to work. So I don't mean that remote work is bad. I mean non-work is bad. That's what I'm referring to.
So so right now, rent, for example, I know when it comes to rent stabilizations that a lot of that stems from local issues as well. Is there any federal policy that you would be interested in to help rent stabilizations or?
Here's the real ticket. Housing construction projects are way too hard to get through the regulatory burdens in states across this country. We have a major shortage in the supply of houses and homes. Laws of supply and demand. When the supply is short and the demand is high, prices go up. That's exactly what's happening for home prices. It's exactly what's happening even for rent across this country. So where does that come from? Federal regulations coming from the three-letter agencies, including the EPA, including other regulations and regulatory bodies at the state level. It's incredibly hard to start a new construction project. I talk to real estate associations across the country. I'm not talking giant mega companies. I'm just talking local real estate, local builders, local commercial builders in states across this country. One of the things that's really difficult is that regulatory burden to new construction. And so I think that we need to really take aim at those regulations, make it really easy for builders to have supply that meets the demand. That's a big part of how we bring down housing costs in this country, is in many ways get the government out of the way.
So how much of it is, in your personal opinion, do you think where do you draw the line when it comes to like price gouging, for example, when we have people who take advantage of the current economy that we're currently living in? So where do you think that line is drawn?
I think the reality is, so I'm a realist, okay? Mm-hmm. I have strong ideals that we're moving towards as a country, but we're never gonna get there unless we're realistic about how we get there as well. People act in their self-interest, whatever's to the maximum extent of the law. And so any policymaker who shows up and says, well, gee, I would wish a capitalist behaves a little bit less capitalistically in a capitalist economy, is signing everybody up for failure, because it ain't gonna happen. And to the contrary, you're actually missing the plot on where the real solutions are. And so what I would do is, rather than wishing people not to act in their self-interest, harness that self-interest in a way that serves all people. And again, that to me is, there's a lot of people who would be building homes if it weren't for the difficult federal regulations, zoning regulations at the local level. Gut it all. Let's have a glut of housing supply. That brings down costs. Same thing with respect to energy production. In the name of some mythology of global climate change religion, and I do think it's a lot of mythology baked into it, we're stopping the construction of new homes. We're stopping drilling and fracking and burning coal. That's what's contributing to energy costs in this country. And so I say rip the Band-Aid off production, productivity. That's what we need more of in the United States of America. We don't have enough of it. Producing more goods and services here, producing as in building more new homes here, producing more energy here, from nuclear to oil to gas to coal.
Instead of foreign countries,
yes.
Is what you're saying.
And also just more in terms of volume. That gives people work here, gives people great opportunities here in the United States. It also brings down cost and helps solve the inflation crisis. That's how we got to address it. And this isn't a Republican or Democrat point. These are just basic principles.
Yes. What is your stance on raising the federal minimum wage? Because it's one thing to have the jobs, but if the jobs aren't paying equivalent to how much it costs to live, then the amount of jobs, it just doesn't matter. So it's really about how much the person is getting paid at the end of the day.
I think the bigger error right now is that if we want to get to the centerpiece of this, I like to go to the root cause, not symptomatic therapy. Mm-hmm. I use medical analogy sometimes because I came from the world of science and my wife's a doctor.
No worries.
I developed medicines, but I like to go to the root cause of the cancer, not the symptomatic manifestations of it. Okay. One of the root causes of the struggles of many young people in particular, I count myself as, in my world at least, presidential race young, but you're probably younger than I am.
You never know.
Well,
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I am.
You're Gen Z, suppose I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. We have fundamentally defrauded young people in this country with the myth that taking on debt and getting a 4-year college degree will somehow allow you to automatically live the American dream. In some ways, my generation already saw the first taste of that myth. I graduated from college in the fall of 2007, on the eve of the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, interesting is let's call that. It was disastrous for many people in my class who graduated. For myself too, it was the firm I worked for lost 60% of its assets the year I joined there at a finance firm in New York City, just like when I thought, and I didn't grow up in money, that this was how I was gonna make it in the system of American capitalism. Then you see later that year, banks and CEOs who have made millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. Those institutions receive bailouts from the taxpayers, from people like my parents that paid into it that didn't benefit from that at all. That's wrong. That's not even capitalism. That is cronyism. And so my generation's already started to get jaded. Now, my generation, now even your generation, has been told that, hey, you take on that debt, pursue a 4-year college degree, that's how you get ahead. It's just false.
Yeah.
It's a lie. And many of those jobs they want to hire, they don't match the skill sets that actually young people were taught that they had to pay ungodly amounts of money to actually earn. And so I literally just, the morning we're having this conversation, just happened to open the newspaper today. The article I'm reading is about like the lunatic level spending at like the University of Kentucky or Penn State. I'm looking at the new construction of buildings at those universities. I mean, they're nice buildings, but to what end when they've raised the tuition of students to rates that are astronomical even for in-state tuition?
Exactly.
It's a scam. And so I think we have to get to those root causes rather than just putting Band-Aids on the back end. We need to support people to go through vocational education, training to be a welder or a mechanic or a carpenter or builder in 6 months.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but what if that is not somebody's ideal personal goal, so to say? Because it's easy to say it from our point of view, but what if that's not the everyday average American's goal? Because at the end of the day, a lot of Americans, I think I can speak for many, where we don't care political party affiliation, we don't care what your first name is, we don't care what your last name is. We're just trying to make ends meet. A lot of people are holding their head above water right now. The way that this economy is set up, it is not working for the average American, and people are really crying out for help at this point. So like, I hear what you're saying, but like, how does that correlate for the average American who may not have those personal goals?
Sure, and I would say there is no such thing as an average American, right? Every American's an individual. So many people do have those goals, actually, but are goaded into pursuing four-year college education because the U.S. Department of Education only gives you aid if you pursue the four-year degree rather than the 1 or 2 year degree that was a better fit for you, right? And so for many Americans who we would call average Americans, everyone's an individual, at least for the people for whom that is the right choice, we shouldn't distort that choice.
For sure.
Now, for other people, for the struggle, look, I think that we have, and I alluded to this earlier, but I was going kind of fast, so I think it's worth pausing on. I think we have a U.S. Federal Reserve, the U.S. Fed, that has been fundamentally hostile to wage growth. I'm not making this up, right? It's worth people understanding this. This is not some conspiracy theory. It's literally the policy of the Fed. When wages go up, they treat that as a bad thing that they have to play whack-a-mole on because they say that is going to be a leading indicator of inflation. First of all, it's just based on a lot of wrong set of facts. Wages are the last thing to go up in an economic cycle. Ask anybody who's run a business. I've run many businesses. Any business owner will tell you, small or large. It's just human nature. The last thing to go up is wages when the business cycle is moving. So what they're actually doing is, first of all, it's not a leading indicator of inflation. It's a trailing indicator of the business cycle. That gets technical, put that to one side. But the punchline is every time wages go up in the last 25 years, since 1997, the Federal Reserve has treated it as a bad thing. Oh, wow. Is it any surprise that real wages for the bottom 99%, not the top 1%, but the bottom 99% have remained flat? Now, back in the Reagan era, there was a theory of trickle-down economics. I believe in it back then. Because if the gains in an economy are driven by greater production, productivity, producing things here, then yes, even if the people at the top are winning, they only win because they have to actually pay the people at the bottom. Trickle-down doesn't work if the gains at the top 1% are driven by paper money, not real production, but by low interest rates and flooding the system with money raining from on high like manna from heaven, but it runs through the people who are at the top, who keep more of it along the way. So there's a kind of an old expression that goes, you know, it's just, I mean, it's a joke kind of thing, but there's a lot of truth to it. If you're a teacher, maybe you go home with a few extra pencils. Well, if you're a banker, maybe you go home with a few extra dollars. And that's really the way it's worked, right? Because that money that the Federal Reserve pumps into the system flows through our banks, the largest banks in the world, and they're actually the ones who are benefiting the most from Federal Reserve created artificial money. It's like we're skiing on artificial snow. Well, it's the people who get to go to the ski resort that benefit from it. Yeah. Now the snow machine's turned off, it's the people at the bottom that actually lose.
Okay. Something that I also want to ask you is your stance regarding increasing the voting age. You've expressed publicly that you want to make the voting age to 24 or 25, I believe. Why is that so?
Well, that's a media headline-driven summary of what the actual policy is. So let me explain the actual policy.
Can I correct myself? I apologize. For context, you said that unless somebody is a military active, unless somebody is a public provider of some sort, but
or pass the civic test. Yeah. So here's where I'm coming from on this. And I understand this is, first thing I want to say is this isn't going to happen until we have a constitutional amendment, right? The bar for that is really high, which means we need a broad national consensus that goes far beyond political parties before this could ever be implemented. So what am I doing at this stage is opening up a conversation where I think we can actually persuade people of all stripes that this is actually going to be good for our nation. Here's where I'm coming from. We have a crisis of national pride in our country. Survey, actually, recent of young people. It's young people in the survey, widely conducted survey. 60% of young people on social media say they would sooner give up their access to vote than to give up their access to TikTok. That's not coming from me. That's coming from hard survey data of what people just say, what's important to them. I don't think that's good. I think voting rates are actually very low among 18 to 25-year-olds. So I'm looking to think outside the box. How do we revive civic pride in this country? I don't think just jingoistic slogans of, rah, rah, red, white, and blue is going to do it. Turns out that we have a beautiful national history. Young people should know that national history. And there's a beautiful thing. Any immigrant who comes to this country has to pass a civics test that has them know to know something about the country. We don't let you become a citizen or vote in this country. No matter how good you are, no matter how much you pay in taxes, you come to this country, live the American dream, make a lot of money, you still can't vote in this country unless and until you pass a basic civics test. How many branches of government are there? What branch of government does the US president lead? Who are our founding fathers who wrote the Federalist Papers that inform our understanding of the Constitution? So my view is every 18-year-old who graduates from high school, ideally, should be able to pass the same civics test that an immigrant from a foreign country has to pass to be a citizen of this nation. Now, tests aren't for everybody, and if not that, then you at least have to do some basic civil service, either civic service, either military service, or in a first responder role. That was the genesis of the idea. Now let's make it practical. A lot of young people don't know this. You may not be aware of this because it only applies to young men in the United States. Young men in the United States, by law right now, have to register for the draft between the ages of 18 and 25. It's called selective service. We don't have an active draft, but if you're a young man between the ages of 18 and 25 and you don't do it, under today's law, and it's been that way for a long time, you have to register on pain of criminal penalties. That means you can go to jail if you don't do it.
Yes.
I would decriminalize that. So that's one of the things I've said is, that's not the way we do things in the United States of America. But if you really want to be an engaged citizen, exercise the civic privileges, including voting, then you should know something minimally about the country. The same thing an immigrant has to know. So that's where I was coming from.
I have to give a little bit pushback on that.
Please.
Because isn't it a contradiction for you to say one moment that we want people in this age group to be more civically involved, but you're essentially adding another obstacle for someone to be.
I understand that's counterintuitive, and that's a very fair question for you to ask. The fact of the matter is voting rates in that age group are already rock bottom. I predict voting rates will skyrocket.
That's not true.
After we make it mean something. That's my belief, at least. And I'll tell you why. Who cares if you're even going through the motion of putting a ballot in a box if you don't even know what that means, right? If someone's voting for US president, I think it's reasonable for them to know what branch of government the US president even leads.
Okay.
I think.
No, I hear you. This is the main policy of yours that I personally actually just disagree with you, which is fair.
And I'll have to tell you something else. You give you points on this. My team.
They disagree with it too?
Well, and also, yes, but the reason they disagree with it is different. It doesn't poll particularly well. A lot of my ideas do poll well. This one does not poll particularly well. The only thing I'll leave is, because I may not convince you even in this sit down today, and I may not convince many of the viewers, but I do want people to know something about me, is that I'm always going to speak the truth, or at least express my true beliefs. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just going to tell people what they want to hear. And one of the things about young people in this country is I think they know when they're being lied to. If I may say it, we know when we're being lied to. And my job is I'm always going to tell you what I believe and what I stand for.
For sure.
And who I am. And that's the best we can hope for is you're not going to agree with 100% of things that I say.
For sure.
But if you at least know that I'm telling you what I believe 100% of the time, I think it's a good enough basis to support me. And this particular idea polled very poorly, and my team tried to convince me out of it, but That's not the game we're playing. And I just think it'll be good for the civic health of this country if we find, and I'll say this one last thing, I'm open to other ideas. If you have other ideas or others have ideas on better ways to revive our civic spirit, I'm open to that.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think it is fair for the American people to look at you and maybe discredit you and your run because you haven't held a public seat office before? Just yes or no. Do you think that's fair?
I wouldn't do that. And the reason why is...
Real quick, this is where it correlates, because the same way that you're saying it's unfair for someone to discredit you.
I'm not saying it's unfair. I'm not saying it's unfair. I wouldn't do that is what I said.
Okay, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, the same way how it's unfair for you to be discredited just because you haven't held public seat office before, that's the same way of you saying that someone is not eligible or is not for you to put a civics test for someone to qualify to vote. You see where that correlates?
I totally hear you. So I wanted you to understand what my motivation is, right? You can either, you can choose to believe me or not, that's fair. And you should always be skeptical of a politician. I've only been one for 6 months, but I'll honestly tell you my motivation is not to disqualify anyone. My motivation is actually to revive civic knowledge and duty and pride in this country. And it's gotten so bad that we're gonna have to think outside the box of how we do it. Now, on my own journey, I just wanna say a couple things. I get why young people are disaffected. I actually did vote once in 2019 when I was 19 years old, back in 2004. I couldn't stand George Bush or John Kerry. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. And then for years, I have been uninspired by both Republicans and Democrats. John McCain or Barack Obama, Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. These people did not move me, and I basically was pretty badly disaffected. I believed in driving change through the private sector. And so I think there's a couple things I'll say. There's many ways to serve the country. I do think that building businesses that make valuable products, in my case, life-saving medicines, I don't think young people should apologize for that. I think that is a way of developing life-saving medicines is a way of serving this country. I'm not boasting about that, but I'm saying that you don't have to apologize for it either. And my general rule of thumb is, if somebody broke your car, you don't turn it over to the same people to fix it. Well, I think we have a badly broken car in our federal government. Take the scam of student loans, bipartisan for 25 years.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Iraq, Afghanistan.
Because I don't want us to divert.
I don't want to turn over the car.
No, I hear you, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't want to divert from the topic at hand, but to me, as someone who works in public policy, it just it screams strategic in a way, because we have to realize that, yes, 18 to 24, we may be voting. We're not voting in the higher rates of those who are 55 to 63. I think that's the highest range right now. But our voting outcome has been increasing within the last couple elections. So when I see a policy like that, it does scream strategic, because a lot of them do usually tend to go left. So I had to really ask you and kind of give you like a pushback on that, because it really is an infringement on one's right to add more obstacles. But
can I ask you a question for your perspective on this? Because this is a great discussion. Why do you think somebody who's been an immigrant to this country, who's paid taxes for 10 years, as a green card holder, and I think this is a good thing that we require this, why do we require them to have to pass a basic civics test before they have the right to vote? What do you think is behind that? Is that a good idea?
I think that stems from also like citizenship as well.
Yep. So what does it mean to be a citizen, actually?
But that's the thing.
That is the question.
You did express, your first election was 2020. So, or not first election, the first time of you voting was the 2020 election.
Since 2000, when I was 19, I voted once, actually.
But like you not voting.
But then I was disaffected, for a long time.
But you not voting didn't make you less of a citizen in some people's eyes. So like with them passing this test, that stems from citizenship, not voting. Voting is someone's right.
So you're using a word that means a lot to me, citizen. And probably one of the most fundamental questions of my campaign is, what does it even mean to be a citizen, actually? It's this word we throw around. What does it mean to be a citizen of the United States of America?
That's where I'm saying that.
And to me, here's my worldview.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but it's not fair for you, it's not fair for you to make that qualification, if that makes sense.
I understand the emotion, because I've talked to young people across this country, and it hurts me because many people who would support me, this ends up being a roadblock.
A deal breaker, yeah.
But I'm not in this to just sort of tell people what they want to hear. This is a deep conviction of mine, okay? And where it comes from is what it means to be a citizen. And this is what I think is at the heart of the matter in the revival of our country. Citizenship isn't even about what do I get. Citizenship is the question of what do I owe? And that's it's not a Republican or Democrat point. But since our founding, that's at least been the idea of civic duty. The question of what it means to be a citizen of this nation is really the question of what do I owe this nation? And so does an immigrant who come to this country, just because I pay taxes, does that mean that I become to be a citizen? No, I owe it to this nation that I've come to know something about this nation, to be proud of that nation, to pledge allegiance to that nation. And I personally think that just the act of being born here is insufficient to be a capital C citizen. To be a true citizen of this republic, this constitutional republic, it means we have to have people who pledge allegiance to this nation. People who will say, yes, my act of voting means something more to me than my ability to use TikTok. People who say that,
but
you know what?
But that's like very like surface level based. That's not the reality. Maybe that's what social media is saying, but that's not like the actuality of people. They're not saying, oh, let me go use TikTok instead of like voting. You see what I'm saying? I think that's what disrupts the narrative.
I'm not blaming anybody. First of all, I want to be really clear about that. I'm not blaming anybody other than a generation of people who came before young Americans now, who have created the conditions for being deeply non-proud of a nation. Mm-hmm. So it's my generation and older that bears the responsibility for self-reflection here. Everything we've talked about, a mythology with respect to taking on student loans to get a 4-year college education, a financial system that doesn't let the bottom 99% get ahead. But yes, I think an educational system and a civic system that also just says, hey, being an American is just about what do I get? Me, me, me. I'll quote a Democrat from eras past. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Whatever happened to that spirit in our country? That's what I want to revive.
Can I ask you this? Okay, so with you in the primary, we know like Donald Trump is the front runner currently.
Yeah.
What's the difference between you and Donald Trump?
So I think the difference between me and everybody else in the Republican field is everybody else is running from something. Mm-hmm. I'm the person in this race who's running to lead us to something, to our vision of what it means to be an American. What does it mean to be a citizen of this nation? What is the American dream? Is it just about green pieces of paper, or is it about something more than that? I think it is about reviving conviction in our purpose as citizens. And so, yes, I, like others, have criticized secular religions like wokeism or transgenderism or climatism or COVIDism. But that's not enough. I think we have to offer an affirmative vision of our own, grounded in the value of each individual, the family, the nation, and God. I don't think God should be a 4-letter word in our culture. I think we would be more united in a country if more of us believed that there was a higher power. I'm not going to force that on anybody. But even talking about that as a matter of values, individual, family, nation, God, that beats race, gender, sexuality, and climate, if you ask me. And I think if you ask most people across this country, they'd say the same thing. And so that's what's a little bit different about me is I'm leading us to run to something, to an actual vision of our own, rather than just criticizing, the radical Biden agenda. Heck, I don't even think Joe Biden's the person in charge. I don't even think Joe Biden's going to be the person I'm running against when I'm the Republican nominee. And so I think the Republican Party focuses too much on beating Biden when that's not inspiring and it's not even meaningful. He's not the guy running the show anyway. What we need to do is stand for a vision and values of our own. And I hope that's not just when I say we, I'm not just talking about the Republican Party, I'm talking about the country. Exactly.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, in such a tense situation or just a high profile position, how do you distress in times like this? Like, what do you do to prioritize your mental health?
It's a good question. So for me, having a family and especially my 2 kids, one of whom I hope is going to come over here right after this interview and I'm going to see him, spending time with them really grounds me. I think it is hugely, people will say, oh, how do you balance campaign life with family life? If you look at it as a balance, game over because it's not even like, it's crazy. But if you view it as actually a family project, which is the way we're treating it, man, it's my source of strength and grounding. I also do like to take a little bit of time, sometimes like unstructured 2 hours just to do long form writing. Sometimes I'll do it, after a nice long bath, grab a notebook. Computer doesn't do it for me, but take a long notebook and just free form. Don't try to think about what you want to say, but just have at it. I'm a tennis player. I enjoy playing tennis. Sometimes,
wow.
I'm not like a weightlifting champion or anything, but I do like to work out at times. It's amazing what that can do to you for physical rejuvenation too. You don't need a fancy gym to do it. Literally, all you need is literally some space and some will to do it. Not even, really. You can just use your own body weight and do it and go for a jog. But, these things I think help keep me, at least so far, sane. We'll see how sane I am by the end of this, but I think it's worked so far, and I hope that, I think also staying true to your purpose is something that really matters, is when you start to fall into the trap of believing that I'm doing all of this by myself, right? It's my will that's causing this adventure to succeed, and my plans that I laid out. That's actually a source of great stress, at least for me. It can feel very confining. For those who are religious, I am, when I remind myself that it's not being done by me, but through me.
Amen.
That gives me my freedom, actually. And even for those who aren't religious, my only advice would be, sometimes advice I have to remind myself you have all these plans. Your plans are stupid. They're silly. Your plans don't mean anything. Now, there's a religious overtone to that for sure, which is that we're put here for a purpose, and I believe there is a higher plan, but I don't think you have to be religious to avail yourself of, I think, some of those de-stressing tactics to just accept that your plans are kind of silly. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make them, but make them in a lighthearted spirit. And then when things go not according to that plan, it doesn't have to ruin your day. That's what I would say.
I want to thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation.
Thank you for coming.
I appreciate it.
It's an honor.
Good luck on the campaign trail. Make sure you prioritize your mental health. And
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Vivek Ramaswamy, please visit vivek2024.com. I'll have all the links in the description down below. Thank you for watching Uduak Connecting People with Policy.
All I know